Hey, a little while ago I uploaded a video showing a 1 hour kuva survival where I played Chroma, and one of you guys asked me about my build, my setup, and I figured since it's been a while since I've shown anything like it, we may as well just have a quick look at what I'm using. Before we get into the details though, there's two things you should know. First of all, this is by no means a perfect or optimized build. This is simply what I'm using, and this is what I used to get through the whole hour of Kuva survival. I'm sure there are better builds, more optimized ways to play or whatever. This is just what I do and how it works for me. And the other thing is this build also uses a whole bunch of Riven mods, so if for whatever reason you feel like copying this, taking inspiration from it, this is probably something you'll want to bear in mind. So let's get to it. Let's start with the frame itself. Chroma Prime. For the arcanes, I'm stacking 2 Arcane Avengers, which each give a 30% flat crit chance. And since they stack with each other when you take damage, you basically, when both of them proc, get a free 60% critical hit chance added to whatever crit chance your currently used weapon has got. So that's pretty useful right there. I like it for this. The other thing is this only works when you take damage, so it's not necessarily something you'd use on, say, Rhino because of his iron skin. But since Chroma basically gets hit non-stop and takes damage all the time, this seems, in my opinion, a reasonable option to go with. As for his aura, I'm mostly using Steel Charge because I'm lazy. You can see this. I haven't put a single Forma on him yet. It's a fairly freshly baked Chroma Prime. You'll probably want to go with, you know, the usual suspects. Something like, say, Corrosive Projection or whatever. I went with Steel Charge because he does have the V polarity slot and it gives you the 18 free points, so that's what I'm going with. But, you know, use whatever you want with it. It's by no means mandatory. I'm going for Vigilante Pursuit in the Exilus slot. Not necessarily because it's also great to have a 30-foot enemy radar, but I'm going for the extra chance to enhance critical hits from primary weapons. What that means is that with the amount of set mods I'm using from this particular Vigilante set, basically, every single time you deal a critical hit, there's a 10% chance it gets upgraded to the next higher tier. For instance, if you score a yellow crit, there's a 10% chance it might get upgraded to orange. Or if you score an orange crit, there's a 10% chance it might get upgraded to red, and so on and so forth. So basically, there's a small chance that the quality of your crit, and therefore the damage, gets increased by a tier. I'm using Primed Flow simply because more energy, because I want lots and lots and lots of energy on Chroma Prime, because I'm constantly spamming his number 2 and 3 abilities, Vex Armor and Elemental Ward respectively. Hunter Adrenaline I'm using for extra energy, because basically I get hit all the time anyway, and I can turn that into extra energy and get my, get the buffs back up. Besides, if you use a fire elemental Chroma, what I'm doing, then you also get extra health, and you can restore your health basically whenever you use your buffs. So this is what I'm going with. Then I'm going for extra vitality, because again, I get hit a lot, and extra health helps with that. Adaptation, I'm not 100% sure about this one, because I've heard both sides of the argument. There's a lot of people saying this mod is completely OP, it's borderline game breaking, it's too powerful, and I've also heard people saying that it's completely useless because it never covers enough damage types anyway, and then you still get one shot in the end. I honestly don't know. I mean, I'm gonna link my video of the 1 hour Kuva survival in the description, so it worked for me, at least for that particular kind of content. If you play anything super duper mega high level or whatever, I don't know. I honestly don't know enough about how this thing does or doesn't work. It seems to do the trick for me. I'm happy with it for the time being. So I'm sure people more experienced with this mod than I am can tell you more about it. It works for me. That's what I'm going with. Primed Continuity for extra power duration pretty much speaks for itself, because we want to keep those buffs running at all time. You don't necessarily need it for as long as you have enough energy to keep recasting it, but you know, since I don't want to keep an eye on a timer that runs out every 10 to 12 seconds, I want to stretch things out a little bit, so I went with the primed continuity. As you can see, it's not fully maxed out because I'm lazy. I haven't farmed a whole lot of endo to get it upgraded and what have you, but you know, there's your lot. Steel fiber for extra armor speaks for itself. You get all the way up to nearly 900 base armor, which I feel is mandatory for a frame like Chroma, especially if you use things like Arcane Avenger. You want to get hit, but you also want to be able to survive these hits. So steel fiber, in my opinion, is something you should simply bring. Augur Message, I'm bringing for that bit of extra ability duration. I'm also using Augur Secrets for a bit of extra ability strength. Again, this one is highly optional. You can use any of your favorite power strength mods. As you can see, I'm also not modding for a whole lot of power strength. We're at 124% here. So you could theoretically replace some of these mods and go for higher power strength if you so desire. The thing is just that by my experience, at least for, you know, content all the way up to say level 100, level 120, you know, higher than that, there isn't really much of a need because you still get such high damage and armor multipliers from Chroma's buffs. It seems wasted. I'd rather have a little bit of extra energy and a bit of duration, but you know, to each their own, whatever works best for you. This is just what I'm using, like I said. You also get the set bonus here, the Augur set bonus, which gives me 120% energy spent on abilities as overshields, meaning every time you use one of your abilities, whatever amount of energy you've used will be added to your shields. And yes, that actually goes into overshields, meaning you can raise your shields beyond 100%. It's not massively useful for Chroma. In fact, if you do want to take damage, for instance, to get your Fury up, or if you want Arcane Avenger to proc, then this will not be beneficial. On the other hand, it adds that little bit of extra survivability for when you need it. And at the end of the day, 120% energy conversion on shields really isn't a whole lot anyway, so you probably won't notice much of a game changer here or anything like that. Right, let's have a look at our main weapon. That's the Supra Vandal. It's perfectly acceptable to go with the regular Supra as well. I mean, the difference between the two isn't that massive in my opinion, but we'll get to that. Personally, I'm a big fan of Vile Acceleration for the Supra Vandal simply because it's fun. Yeah. You could totally just go for something like Speed Trigger, because that one, while only giving you 60% extra fire rate rather than 90, doesn't come with the 15% damage penalty. You can also go for something like Shred and, you know, have your bullets pass through enemies. I just like hosing down lots and lots of enemies with this ridiculously overpowered massive stream of bullets, so Vile Acceleration is what I do for happiness. But again, you can totally replace it for something similar that raises your damage and or rate of fire. Completely up to you. Serration is a no-brainer for that 165% extra damage. Then we're using Piercing Caliber simply because, as you can see here, we deal mostly puncture damage. I raised it all the way to 1200, which may not sound like a lot, but seeing as the Supra Vandal already fires 3 bullets per shot, and we get a whole lot of rate of fire, we're at 23.75 here, and on top of that we're getting all the multi-shot. We'll see that in a second. We've got super high crit multiplier, so it adds up. It really adds up, so I'm going for that. Vital Sense for that extra critical damage, because again, you can see that here, a 6.2 crit multiplier. Yeah, every critical hit deals more than 6 times its damage added on top. Heavy Caliber, again, because extra damage, and yes, it does greatly harm our accuracy, but honestly, at a fire rate of over 23, with a massive ammo capacity and a ridiculous rate of fire, I honestly don't care if a bunch of my shots never hit the mark, because there's still plenty left to kill stuff. Split Chamber for that extra multi-shot. Should be self-explanatory. Same goes for Vigilante Armaments for extra multi-shot, and again for the extra chance to enhance a critical hit from yellow to orange, from orange to red. And then I'm using this as a Riven mod. It adds just flat out damage. On top of that, it adds extra puncture damage, and it raises the crit damage. So yeah, kind of lucked out on that one. And if you combine all of that together, you can see that here we've got a crit chance of 16%, which isn't great. But the moment both of our Arcane Avengers proc, we get an extra 60% added to that. That takes us to 76% crit chance. And on top of that, we're going to skip the other weapons a second and go straight to our cat, the Kavat. And this one, thanks to Cat's Eye, has the crit buff, which grants another 60% crit chance. And that means the 60% with the 60% from Arcane Avenger, if all of that procs at the same time, we've got 120% chance to crit. And then you add the 16% from the Supra Vandal and you'll be at 130% crit chance, meaning that every hit, for as long as these buffs are active, is a guaranteed yellow crit with a 36% chance to be an orange crit, which again has a 10% chance to be upgraded to red. So that's a whole lot of damage if you consider the 6.2 crit multiplier, and that's where all the damage comes from. Of course, on top of Chroma's damage buffs, you know, Fury, you get the idea. Other than that, there's really nothing unusual or special about this Kavat. You know, you use these usual suspects. I use Fetch because it just makes it easier to pick up all of that loot. Bite, Maul. I'm using Link Armor because, you know, Chroma has a lot of armor, so it makes sense. Same for Link Health, especially on a fire-based Chroma who raises his own health all the time, and, you know, the cat benefits from that as well. I'm using Hunter Recovery, not just for the lifesteal link, which doesn't just mean that your Kavat restores health whenever you punch something, but it also works the other way around. So the Kavat kills something, you get a bit of health back. And as you can see here, because I'm stacking 2 Hunter mods, my companion deals 50% extra damage for every enemy, on enemies that are affected by slash procs, and basically all of my enemies are affected by slash procs if I melee them, but we'll get to that in a second. Medi Pet Kit, so, you know, the regular bleed out mod is perfectly acceptable if you don't have a Medi Pet Kit. I found that one, I got lucky, so I'm using this one because it also increases the heal rate. It heals the pet over time. It honestly doesn't make much of a difference. If your pet gets one shot, it gets one shot, but you know, you'll want it anyway for the bleed out reduction. If you don't have it, use a regular bleed out mod, it's fine. Swipe, again, yeah, you know, sharpened claws. All of these are pretty much self-explanatory. If you don't have any of them, I'm sure you've got plenty adequate ones to replace them. By my experience, all the companion mods are fairly simple and easy to get over time. So the one that you really want, the one that's really important here is Cat's Eye, which the Adarza Kavats come automatically with. They come equipped with these, and all the rest you will find over time. They're not that important. For as long, granted, that you can keep the cat alive, because no Kavat means no Cat's Eye, and that will severely limit your critical damage, obviously. Right, then we have our twin Grakatas here. Again, they're by no means the best thing ever. I'm just using them because they're so fun. I really, really like my twin Grakatas. Let's start here with Barrel Diffusion for the extra multi-shot and Lethal Torrent for even more multi-shot and rate of fire. Then Primed Heated Charge for extra heat damage. Hornet Strike for even more damage. Augur Pact for even more damage. And yeah, okay, for the Overshield buff, I, again, don't massively care for that one, but the 90% extra damage is great. Of course, you can also just go for an extra elemental damage mod of your personal, you know, whatever you prefer. Whatever suits your taste. Prime Target Cracker for extra critical damage, because as you can see, we have another crit multiplier here of 5.7, which is pretty high. And Frostbite for that extra status chance. And a bit of Cold, because that adds nicely to the primed heated charge. You can see that here we've got a status chance of 54%, and at a fire rate of 32, that means even if only every other shot or so procs, you basically knock your enemies on their ass pretty much all the time with the blast proc. And as you can see, we also have Corrosive, and that one we're getting for free from this little ribbon here. It adds a bit of status chance, which is great, so we don't have to stack all of the status mods. Of course, if you wanted to get something too closer to 100%, you'd have to mix these things up a bit, but I'm okay with just 54%. And as you can see, it comes with Electricity and Toxin on it, so that's our free Corrosive proc right there. And basically, while this is really not ammo efficient, you probably won't be maining an entire mission with only these guns, unless you bring a whole lot of ammo pizzas with you. It's just, first of all, it's stupidly fun to use. It looks absolutely ridiculous and I really love it. And the other thing is basically anything that comes with armor on it will be stripped of it in just, 1 second or two, because that's all it takes to empty the entire clip. Or magazine, sorry. I know some people are triggered by the word clip. I'm not American. I know nothing about guns, so, you gotta forgive me there. Right. And that leaves our melee weapon. That's also a bit unusual. Over the... Yeah, I don't know. How long has it been now? Has it been a year now, 2 years? I don't know. Blood rush and body count. That's kind of the thing that almost every weapon these days, when it comes to melee, seems to go for. And lots of crit. Then you just stack that, you stack that kill counter and just go for ridiculously high crits. The thing is, though, first of all, that's all about to change with Melee 3.0 for whenever that happens. And the other thing is that I like using my melee weapons for a bit of an emergency heal. And the problem is, if you build for crit, then if you want to use your melee weapon to heal, you'll always want to go for something like Life Strike, and that means you have to main hand your melee weapon, you have to, channel in order for Life Strike to do anything at all. And it's a bit awkward. I'm not a massive fan of that. I'm lazy. I like to just smash the melee button, even if I don't main hand the melee weapon, if I want a bit of health really quick. So we're going for Healing Return, which restores health for every status type affecting a target. Yeah. And the thing is, this weapon has an absolutely ridiculous range. We'll get to that in a second. So basically, you hit absolutely everything around you, and you inflict status types like it's going out of fashion. You can see that here. We've got a status chance of 100%. We'll get to that in a minute. So this one is really great for self-healing. It might not be quite as quick as, say, a Life Strike. You won't do it in a single hit, but for as long as you don't get one shot, you should have plenty of time to get back up to full life with just, one group of enemies. So this is what I'm using, and this one does not require channeling. You don't have to main hand the melee weapon. You can just mash your melee button. You can, button. Quick melee. The quick melee button. Use that one. It'll heal you just as well, unlike Life Strike. As for the rest of the mods, I'm using Carving Mantis, not because it's oh so great or because it's my favorite, but simply because it fits the polarity. It's what I had. It's entirely possible that it's the worst possible stance. I don't know. I honestly do not know. I just use it because I've got it and it works for me. Condition Overload we're using because, again, we're at 100% status chance and we're using Healing Return already. So everything is built around status here. And Condition Overload raises our melee damage by 60% for every type of status affecting our target. And as you can see here, we can stack Slash. I don't know if Impact and Puncture stack as well, but we can add them on top of Magnetic and Gas. As for Magnetic and Gas, I figured, on my main weapon, on the Super, I don't use any elements at all. On the on my offhand, the secondary weapon, I'm using Corrosive and Blast. So, in order to just be ready to face just about any kind of enemy, we're using Magnetic and Gas here. Of course, you can also specialize configurations here and just go for the same elements on all your weapons at the same time and mix it, change them depending on the situation. But again, I'm lazy, so, if I run into any beefy enemies with big fat shields, I just bash the melee button a little bit and, get the shields down with these magnetic procs. Gas is always nice when you're fighting large groups of enemies, especially if you have long range on your melee weapons. So that stuff procs a lot and, it deals decent enough damage. Again, it's not going to be as strong as a weapon that's completely centered around melee kill counters and crit damage, but it still gets the job done. Again, if you don't believe it, feel free to look at my older video. I'll link it in the description, and it's fine for me. I'm okay with it. And again, Verdant Scourge and Berserker for extra attack speed, Volcanic Edge, Voltaic Strike, Vicious Frost. So basically I'm going for all 4 status elemental mods to get that sweet 100%. And then we're using a special ribbon here, which adds nearly 180% range. Yeah, so I'm not using any extra range mods. Of course, if you wanted to go completely crazy, you could, for instance, get rid of Berserker and say, nah, I don't need that extra attack speed here. I'll just use extra range and go even crazier. Have something like a primed reach, was it? I think so. It doesn't matter now, you know. Yeah, primed, reach, there it is. You could use this on top of, but you know, I've already got 180% extra range. I feel that's plenty. On top of that, this one adds 211% extra melee damage, and it adds another 83.5% attack speed. And to make up for that, the one big downside on this is that it completely eradicates...
A new alert has begun. It will be marked on navigation.
It completely gets rid of our combo duration, basically minus 8.5 seconds. Yeah, that means you just won't get your combo counter up, and it really doesn't matter. Again, we're getting our damage not from stacking kill count, and we're not getting it through crits or whatever, but through condition overload, so this is fine. Of course, ultimately that means this weapon scales worse, or this setup scales worse against super high level enemies, say triple digits, than something that's built completely around crit and, you know, body count and the like. But again, since this is subject to change in the very near future anyway, I feel this might potentially be more future-proof than anything built around just, you know, combo counters. But we'll see. We'll have to see how it all plays out in the future. And that pretty much sums it all up. There's absolutely nothing super unusual or special about this. I mean, sure, you may want to spend a bit of platinum if you cannot be bothered to farm for the arcanes. There's other arcanes you can use. For instance, I'm a big fan of, hang on, what we got. Arcane Acceleration. It's grossly underrated in my opinion. I use that when I play Rhino, even when I'm using the Super Vandal, because again, Rhino doesn't really take any damage, so Arcane Avenger does nothing for him. This one gives you a massive boost to your rate of fire on your primary weapon. So imagine if you're already using Vile Acceleration and then get another 60% fire rate. It's pretty sweet. Another thing that I personally like a lot is Arcane Strike, because it gives you extra attack speed on melee weapons, and again, these things are cheaper than dirt these days, so you should be able to trade for them fairly easily. So, or just don't use any arcanes at all. It's not like they make or break the build. Of course, that means you won't get all these nice orange and potentially red crits here and there, but at the end of the day, unless you play anything super duper high, it shouldn't really matter all that much. Other than that, I'm just using box standard Madurai here, and as you can see, I haven't really leveled into it that far yet, because again, I'm too lazy to farm and unlock all of this stuff. If it happens, it happens, but you know, it's far from complete. I haven't really looked into any of these others yet or unlocked anything on there, so it's something you can spend your entire life doing. I'm just not that dedicated, I guess. And there's your lot. So, this is my Chroma. There's many like them, but this one's mine. Bye.